Why should you buy a profitable online business? And if you're going to buy a profitable online business, how much should you be investing from your own personal money? And then should you use finance? And what are the different deal structures you can use? And if you are going to acquire a business, maybe finance it or just use your own capital, where do you even buy these businesses? Hi, I'm Jaryd Krause. I'm the host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And today I'm doing a solo podcast episode, and this podcast episode is inspiration based on some of the best podcast episodes I've done, the most popular, and highlighting the most common questions, answering those in depth. And also because a lot of people loved my last YouTube video, me explaining some figures on buying an online business, how much it costs, what's the ROI, what it would look like if you're using finance. And I can link to that YouTube video in the show notes for you as well. So many people loved it. Great comments, great feedback. I'm creating this podcast for you. Now, firstly, I'm not a practicing CPA or a financial advisor. This podcast episode is not financial advice. So get everything checked with a professional. But I also want to state I am going to be sharing a lot of experience that I've had with over a decade of helping people buy online businesses. I help tens of thousands of people buy businesses now, make millions of dollars, save millions of dollars, and basically change their lives for the better so they can spend more time doing what they love with the people they love. And this podcast episode is going to have a lot in it. So I do suggest you re-listen to this again and go through it. So first and foremost, why? Why should you buy an online business? Well, let's be honest. Starting an online business, 90% of them fail. So if your main goal is to buy something making money, or if your main goal is money, don't buy something. You're likely not going to last, right? I believe that there's only a few people that should start an online business, and that is if they have a product and service that doesn't exist in the world, and they're so passionate about it that they're prepared to do work in the business and build it for 5 years or more without getting paid. A minimum of 3 to 5 years without taking money off the table. But if your goal is like, I don't really love my job or I don't love what I'm doing and I want to get income and I want to do it online and I want to do it as soon as possible, why would you go to the trouble of starting an online business when you could buy one? 90% of them fail. And I've felt this and done this myself, and I've started multiple online businesses and failed them. And I have started one and built it. But continuing on, I only buy businesses, and so do my clients, because we know it works. Even the greatest entrepreneurs grow by acquisition. And the wealthiest people do this as well. That's what the wealthy do, is they buy profitable assets that are already producing an income. Think about Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and all these large companies. This is what they do to grow. Facebook bought Instagram, WhatsApp, and they just buy out these other businesses. Google, they have their own team. So does Microsoft and all these large companies, and that's how they continue to grow. They grow by acquisition. They build their wealth by acquisition. And that's what Warren Buffett does, is he buys companies, right? And he was one of the richest people in the world. Also, Elon Musk, he buys companies as well. Yes, he started a lot, but if you look into it, a lot of them he's bought too. So that's why I think buying is better than starting. And that's why I think if you're trying to build an income stream, you should be buying an asset that produces an income already. Another great reason is when you buy an online business, you're buying yourself an income stream straight away. And that money starts to get into your account. And this is the thing that knocks people off their feet and a lot of my clients, when they first buy a business, are like, oh, wow, like they change the bank accounts over and the money starts filtering into their bank account. Another reason why I love this as a way to replace your income is you can do this while you keep your current job. And that's what I actually recommend. Is a lot of people come to me and say, Jaryd, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go buy a business. And I'm like, whoa, hang on, slow down. Why would you quit when it can take a little bit of time to find an online business to buy? And you've got to educate yourself and you've got to get your finances together and learn how to buy the business. And maybe the business is not available for you right away as well. So when people quit their job and they don't have an income anymore, they're trying to find a business. And as they dig into their savings more and more, they rush themselves into buying a business that may not be the right business. So our goal here, typically, most people listening, is to replace their income. But is that really the goal? I think what most people's goal is to have a better life and have less stress, right? And have more ease and flow. And if you're going to quit your job, what you're doing when you're trying to search for a business is what you're actually doing is you're creating a more stressful state because you're putting yourself in a position that you need to rush to get an income now. So it's better. And maybe you don't love your work and your job, and maybe it is a little bit stressful as well. But I beg to differ that the financial stress is pretty severe when you're spending your money and you're not making any money, and then you need to force yourself into investment. Now, I didn't love my job as a plumber either, but I stuck with it. And I bought 2 businesses before I quit my job. And I made sure those 2 businesses were making me more money than my current job. So it wasn't too stressful for me to leave my current job. I left my current job empowered, right? And not empowered in a way that I'm like, yes, I'm going to do this and I can do this. I left my current job knowing like, I'm good. I've done the hard yards, right? I didn't have a big journey ahead of me. I'd already done that whilst I kept my current job and that safety blanket of that income. So this is what I suggest people do if they're wanting to replace their income. Another big reason an online business is so valuable and why you should buy one is because it provides location independence and time independence. Now, there's a lot of media out there about buying a boring business and buying mechanic workshop or whatever it is. Now, you can be tied to the location and you can be tied to certain timeframes. That mechanic shop may actually only be open between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., right? And that's the only hours that your employees work, and contacting them outside those hours, they don't respond. So, and then also you're in a certain location too. Now, with an online business is you can literally be anywhere at any time. I've done this for over a decade now, and I record these podcast episodes in all different locations, mostly in my home studio, but I've recorded podcasts in more than probably 10 countries now in all different areas. And you can do this emailing, customer service, wherever you are. It's a really, really beautiful thing to be able to have location independence. So wherever is best for you to move with your spouse, your partner, your friend, your family, and your kids, and have the time independence. So you can either pick your kids up from school and drop them off, right? Or drop them off from school and pick them up, or take them to sports and work during the day. It's such a valuable game changer. Now, how much should you spend? How much should you be buying an online business for? Well, firstly, you need to ask yourself, how much capital do you actually have? And then if you're starting out, I believe, and this is my personal belief and not financial advice, is that you shouldn't be spending all of your money. I believe if you're spending more than 70, 80% of your capital, then you're putting yourself in a more stressful position, right? We need to remember that if we're buying an online business, is it that we just actually want to buy an online business, or is our goal, is that just the vehicle? And our goal is to have location independence and time independence, which is not just that, but the bigger goal for that is a less stressful life. We need to remember our main goal is probably less stress. So why put all of your capital into something and then be stressed that if you hurt your leg or somebody in your family needs some money or there's an emergency, you don't have any money to use to resolve those issues? Don't put yourself in a hard spot, right? Don't put yourself on the ropes. That's my opinion. Some people have a higher risk tolerance and they go for it, but I reckon 70, 80% of your capital is sufficient. Next, what's our actual goal in terms of what we want to make as well? Well, some people come to me and say, Jaryd, I want to buy a business making $5,000 a month. I'm like, great, cool. And that's their goal because they want to replace their income. And I ask them, how much money do you have? And they might say, oh, I've got, 60 grand. I'm like, okay, well, a $5,000 online business, a $5,000 per month online business is going to be far more than $60,000. We need to do the maths. Typically, the ROI of an online business is around 20 to 35% when you purchase it. Now, this can fluctuate, of course. I've seen businesses where you're getting a 40% ROI in year one, right? I've bought a business where I achieved 100% ROI in just 7 months. That's because I bought the business, I put some things in place, and it went really, really well. So that is an extreme example. And sometimes you're just buying a business that provides a 25% return on investment. 25 to 35. Now let's stick with just like a 30% return on investment. What does that actually look like? Well, if you want a business that's making $5,000 a month, if you times that by 3 years, which is average multiple, right? 3 years of the annual net income. So if you do 5,000 times 12, what have we got? We've got $60,000 there per year in annual net profit. And you times that by 3 for 3-year multiple, you got $180,000. So $1,000 per month business on average will be costing around $180,000. Okay, it could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less. Now, here's where people get tripped up, is they want to get a business or buy a business with a very, very low multiple. Now, if you buy a business with a very, very low multiple, typically it's a low multiple because there's more risk involved with the business. I tell people not to shy away from a higher multiple because it can be a less risky business. Of course, there's nuances that you need to check throughout due diligence. Now, with multiples, all of these change and fluctuate between different business models. For example, an e-commerce business might be around a 2 to 3 year multiple, and media businesses might be around a 3 to 4 year multiple, and software businesses can be around a 4 to 6 year multiple and a lot higher even. Okay, it depends on the asset. And like I said before, the less risk within the asset, typically the higher the multiple. What is a risky asset? What does it actually look like? Typically, a less risky asset is something that has no single source dependency on just one revenue stream, and no single source dependency on just one traffic stream, or single source dependency on a person or one client. That's very, very important. Those sort of businesses are a lot more risky. And then there's a lot more nuances within that. Is the traffic trending up, down, sideways, and why? Now, if you want to get more into the due diligence, which is the data you need to find to make sure a business is a good investment, get my due diligence framework. It takes the guesswork out of buying a business. It's helped people make a lot of money and save people tons of money. You go to buyingonlinebusinesses.com/free resources. It's such a valuable asset. It's a really, really good place to start. It's basically the questions you need to ask about the business to get enough data to see if it's a good business or not. So another thing that I want to talk about is in the how much to spend category is size does matter. And size does matter is very, very important. And I'll put a link to another podcast episode that I've done that's more expansive on different sizes and different categories of business and why a smaller asset can be more risky than a larger asset. But in brief, I still recommend you check that episode out. There'll be a link to it in the show notes. Is that a smaller asset, if you're buying a $50,000 business compared to a $500,000 business, a $50,000 business is 10 times more risky. And this is very, very general, right? It's 10 times more risky, has 10 times less resources and income, and is typically going to require 10 times more work than a $500,000 business. Now, a $500,000 business is compared to a $50,000 business is going to be 10 times less risky. And it's going to earn 10 times as much and typically going to take you 10 times less effort to grow and run the business. Now, same with larger businesses. As you go up from a $500K business to a $5 million business, there's so much more resources there. Typically, there's going to be less risk, and you're going to have, from a $500K business, this is where you go from sort of working in the business yourself and working on the business as an owner to a $5 million business is typically you're not going to be working in the business at all. And maybe you work on the business 1 to 3 hours a month, right? And you have staff or you have a chief of operations doing all the work for you, right? And that's the difference between larger businesses. Typically, there's a good conversation of like, if I've got $50,000, should I buy a $500K business with my $50,000 using financing? Okay, you can do that with SBA. In other countries, you'll need a larger deposit. I'll talk about financing very, very soon. Or if you've got 100K, should you buy a 500K business and use financing, or should you buy a $100,000 business? For me, typically, if I was starting out from scratch, I think it's so much easier to buy a larger business, because if you've got, say, a 500K business compared to a $5,000 business, if something happens with this $500,000 business, it's going to be making what? $25,000 a year. I could throw $50,000 at that business over a 6-month period to resolve an issue and fix a problem. Whereas if I've got a $50,000 business, I've got $5,000 over a certain period to throw at it, which is going to take me so much more time to resolve the issue and stress and pressure. So I personally like larger assets, but each to their own, and everybody has their own different risk profiles and risk tolerances. So now I want to move into a little bit of financing. Okay. Now, how should you finance it? And I want to talk about some numbers and what it looks like to finance it. But this is the personal question of how should you finance it. For people that want to move faster, it's a great option to go away and get financing. If you're not comfortable with the risk of finance, just do not do it. Now, in America, there's a lot of lenders that help provide SBA loans, which is a Small Business Administration loan, and it's a government-backed loan. I recommend people in the US do this if you're wanting finance. I have a bunch of lending partners that I like to use for my larger clients that I'm buying them 7 to 8 figure assets. If you guys want referrals and you're looking at getting finance, let me know. I can do an intro to you or link to them. Very, very valuable. Also, Swoop. I am a partner of Swoop, and a lot of people I refer to Swoop because they provide lending not just within America. They provide lending for Australia, Canada. They do provide funding for the US, but also UK and different areas of Europe. You can get funding. The terms aren't as good as with an SBA loan. Well, some can be. But if you're outside the States and you want to get financing for a business, let me know. I can intro you to Swoop. Actually, I'll put a link in the show notes as well. So you can contact Swoop, put your details in and sort of work out what your borrowing capacity is and how much you can finance for a business acquisition. Now, this is a massive game changer because funding for online businesses outside of the States hasn't been much access to it now. And I've started to work with Swoop. And Flipper offers this as well to be able to help people that are all over the world get funding for acquisitions. So I'll put a link to them in the show notes. Now, let's talk about the difference in acquiring different businesses, right? A $10,000 business is typically going to be making around $3,000 a year. Okay. So it's going to be making about $250 a month. Now, this is where some people are. This is where they're starting at. They got $10,000. Personally, for me, if I had $10,000 or under, I would be looking at going back to the drawing board and earning as much money as I personally can to be able to get closer to the $20,000 to $50,000 range and then starting there and acquiring from there. Why do I say that? Because a business under $10,000 is typically not a business. It's a startup. To get a startup to work, it's a 90% failure rate. You're going to need to put a lot of time, effort, and energy into it. And most people that say they want to work online and make money online just don't have the capacity to be able to do that, which is why I think we're better off maybe working 2 jobs. And I've done that before. I advocate for saying, if you want to earn more money, you can, and you can do it through a job, and you can get multiple jobs, and you can get maybe an online job on the side that you do after hours in your primary job and save up more money. And you can get to that range of buying a larger asset or making more money online faster by buying a larger asset by working versus trying to work out how to do this online. So I'm not an advocate for smaller acquisitions typically. There's other people that can help with that. I just think it's a lot more stress, pressure, and the failure rate is significant. I think if you can get closer up to the 50K range and start from there, you put yourself in a far better position. Then you've got a 100K business. Now, a 100K business is going to make around 30K a year. It's a good place to start. Obviously, there's a lot of work. You're probably going to be working in that business 10 to 15 hours a week to get it growing and build it up to a 500K asset or $1 million asset even. And from there, you can sell and then buy a larger business. Typically, if you're going to build a business from 100K to say maybe 500K and it takes you 3 years. In that 3-year period, you're going to be hopefully working your regular job as well because you're only getting a 30K income. So you save your 30K income or you invest some of that back into the business and say you're saving 20K a year from that business over a 3-year period. And then you've also got your savings from the job that you have. And then you sell the business. You got 3 forms of capital there. Savings from work, the capital growth from the business, and then savings from the business, and you can pull that together and buy a larger business. Now, where this starts to become a lot easier and a lot more fun is when you buy a $2 million business or a $1 million or a $2 million or up to a $5 million business or more. And this is what I want to explain because This is where it becomes really, really game changing. This is more in relation to the YouTube video that I did record about the examples of using SBA financing and using financing in general. Now, $1 million business, right? Roughly it's going to make around $300K per year. So if you want to buy $1 million business and you want to do it with financing, say SBA, you can go and use a 10 to 20% deposit. Now, let's just say you use a 15% deposit, right? You've got 150K and you buy a $1 million business. So your loan is going to be, well, that's going to be $850, right? So you're going to have an $850,000 loan. Now, an $850,000 loan at an average rate of 10%, which is what the SBA provide, is you got $85,000 of repayments per year, right? For that business that's making $300K a year. So then you put your 150K in, you buy $1 million business with your 150K deposit, 850 in financing, and then you take your 300K income from the business, you take off your $85,000 of lending, finance, interest repayments, and you're left with $215,000 in net. So what I'm saying here is you can buy a $1 million business with $150,000, 15% deposit, and draw a $215,000 wage per year. Now, let's say you wanted to grow that business a little bit more. Okay. Maybe you want to put in an extra, say, $65,000 a year. Okay, for growth, right? So you take off $65,000 off your $215,000 of net income, your wage, and you're left with $150,000 wage, and you've got this $1 million business that you're putting an extra $65,000 in a year, and you're buying yourself $150,000 wage for your $150,000 of deposit for this business, which is quite cool. And as you start to scale up, you start to see, wow, okay, like I can start to really make a bigger impact with the bigger business that I buy. And it becomes a lot easier because these businesses might take you 5 to 10, 15 hours a week to run, but you're getting paid a $150,000 wage from that business. And you also own an asset that's growing in capital growth. Then you go, do I buy a $2 million business? Okay, let's say, for example, that somebody's got a little bit more wealth, a little bit more capital. And you go, I could probably buy a $2 million business. Now, what's the minimum deposit using SBA for a $2 million business? It's going to be $200K. But let's say you put 15% deposit down, you have $300K cash. Now, not everybody has $300K cash. Another option that people use is they use a HELOC. They might have 1 or 2 properties and they might have some cash. They might have like 150K cash saved, and they might have some capital or some equity within their property, and they take out a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, or in Australia, we just call it taking out equity. And they might take 150 out of a HELOC, and they might have 150K cash, and they bundle that together, and they have 300K that they can use as a deposit to buy a $2 million business. So if you're buying a $2 million business and you're using 300K in capital, your lending is going to be 1.7 million, right? And you times that by 10% interest, that's $170,000 a year in lending repayments. Now, what does a $2 million business roughly make? It's roughly going to make around $600,000 net profit per year. So if you got $600,000 net profit per year and you take off your $170,000 in interest payments, you're left with $430,000. Now, let's say you're like, cool, I understand online business a little bit, but I don't want to run this online business, right? But you've got your $600K net, and then you've got your repayments, which are $170,000 a year. So you're left with $430,000 in a wage or income per year. Now, you go, I could hire somebody, right? There's an option to hire an operator for $130,000 a year. So you take off $130,000 off your $430,000 wage. And obviously, what are you left with? You're left with $300K in net profit per year for a business that you bought for $2 million using finance, and you have an operator that you're paying a very good wage, $130,000 a year, and then you can also provide an incentive to them. Now, that incentive, if you show me the incentive, I'll show you the result. The better the incentive, the better the result, obviously. So with that, you might say if that operator reaches X% of growth in the business, I'll give them 5% of equity. It might take them 6 months to do that. It might take them 12 months to do that, but they're going to get 5% of the equity. Maybe they end up over a 3-year period. For example, they end up growing the business, and because the incentive is so good, they're getting paid 130K wage, plus they're going to get 5% every KPI. And say they grow the business exceptionally over a 3-year period at 5%, and they get 5% equity per year for hitting their markers over a 3-year period, and they gain control of 15% of equity of the business. Now, say they just double the size of the business in 3 years, right? So it goes from a $2 million to a $4 million asset. Now, you have gained capital growth from a $2 million asset to $4 million. So that's the difference is $2 million. And then you give them 15% of $2 million, which is 150K of, sorry, it's a little bit more because it's the full size of the business. You give them a great portion of capital. Doesn't need to be a lot, 15%, but they're growing the business for you. You don't have to touch the business at all. So as you can see, as you start to scale the size of the business, there's a lot more opportunity for you to earn a bigger wage with less work. So that's just the example that I wanted to share. This is what I help people do. I work as a buy-side M&A advisor, help people get the finance. Obviously, you need to have some capital to get finance. And then I help people get finance, and then we go away and I build them out an acquisition strategy, and then I go and find that business either on market or off market, and we purchase that business. Obviously, I help with growth and post-sale support if people want it. But if you guys are interested in buying a 7-figure asset, I'd suggest not doing it yourself. I would suggest having an advisor to do it for you. There's no point in learning this whole thing when you don't need to. It can take a long time, and I've got a decade experience doing it. Or you could hire somebody else to do it, of course, that knows the market really, really well, can get you a great deal. Yeah, if you're interested, just reach out, Jaryd@buyingonlinebusiness.com, or reach out on LinkedIn, hit me up. Anything under the 500K range, I don't help people buy as an advisor. I think it's worth you learning how to do it because you're probably going to be working in the business yourself a lot more. So it's very, very helpful for you to learn how to do it at that lower end range, and then you'll be able to grow it yourself to get to that $1 million to $2 million and $5 million acquisition range. Obviously, if you are a high net worth individual and you want to build out a holding company, maybe you've got a couple $100K, we can build you out a holding company, buy one asset, and continue to buying more through leverage. That's the options of financing and how to use them. And there's obviously multiple different ways. Like I said, if you're in America, you can use SBA. I have some lending partners that I can refer you to. And then also, if you're outside of America, the terms aren't as good. America is pretty amazing with their credit and how they provide that, but the terms aren't as good in other countries. Say as Australia, you might need a 30% deposit. Maybe you can get a 7% loan in terms of terms with a 3 to 5 year payback period, but the terms are very, very different in different countries. So reach out if you have questions. Now let's talk about structuring the acquisition in terms of, do you use all finance? Do you use all cash? Can you use seller financing? Can you buy a business for no money down? This is very, very big question that people have is, I want to buy a business and I've got 10K and I want to buy $1 million business because I've heard you can buy a business for no money down. Well, first and foremost, don't be fooled by the media selling you this option. If you're buying something with no money down, it's typically going to be a desperate business, a declining business, so a depreciating asset, or a very, very desperate seller. And they're the types of people and businesses that are going to accept less money because they're in a tough position, and so is the business. So what are some of the structures that you are normal in this range of online businesses? You're not doing any more than 10 to 20% seller financing typically. Now, there's some extreme cases where people do more seller financing, but anything between, I would say, 300K range and up is you're looking at 10 to 15, maybe 20%, max 25% seller financing when you get up to the $5 million range. 300K to 500K, 300K to $5 million range is going to be roughly around that. Anything more than that is definitely an outlier. So then let's just say it's a 10% or 15% seller financing. The rest is you're going to have to come up with cash. So if you're buying a business between $20,000, $1,000, typically most of these assets where we are at the market today, they're going to be selling for cash. Now, you might have a 20% seller financing note and some clawbacks and all that sort of stuff involved. They start to come in after the $200,000, $300,000 range of the asset size. But you're not buying a business for no money down. And even if you're buying $1 million business or a $2 million business, typically you need to have some skin in the game to be able to get finance. For example, we're buying a business now at the moment. It's $2 million business. My clients are putting $400K down. And then we've got the rest financing, but also a portion of seller financing. So you can do it that way. You are using a little bit of your own money compared to the size of the deal, but you're using finance from a lender, not from just a seller. Now, typical seller financing, it can be the same interest rates as SBA loan. It can be anywhere from 8 to 12%, depending on the loan term as well. So I'm sure you guys might have more questions around all of those financing and figures. If you do, hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat. Ask me any of your questions you have. If I get a lot of questions, I can do a follow-up podcast episode to this, because I've just been like fountaining and fire hosing you with so much value in this pod. Now, let's talk about where do you get these businesses, right? You can buy them off market, but before we get to off market, I suggest you check on market. So you can go to places like flipper.com. Flipper have gotten a lot better. I'll put a link to all these places in the show notes as well, so you can check out Flipper. I would also recommend checking out empireflippers.com. You can check out quietlight.com for software businesses. I'm talking 7 figures and up. You've got FE International. You've got different places like Investors Club. You've got motioninvest.com. There's so many different places that you can get online businesses from different brokers. Now, depending on what type of business you want to buy, I suggest typing into Google e-commerce brokers or YouTube, like where to buy a YouTube channel or where to buy an e-commerce business or where to buy a blog, where to buy a software business. And then it will come up with a bunch of new, probably the most relevant brokers that you can use, because there's brokers coming, new brokers coming up here and there all the time. The primary ones are the ones that I mentioned, obviously Flipper, Empire Flippers, Quiet Light, FE International, and those others. They're the primary ones that have been around for quite a while. I suggest looking into them and using them. Otherwise, you can just go into Google and literally type in where to buy this type of business, and different places will pop up. Then you can get them off market as well. Now, if you are very specific in the type of business you want to buy and you want to buy an off market business, you can look up people that do outreach for you to buy a business. Cost price is quite significant. So you're probably going to want to be buying a business over the 500K range, maybe over the $1 million range, if you're paying somebody to do outreach for you. Another way to do it is to be in the industry for a while. Don't treat this as a short-term game. If you're looking to buy a business and buy them offline, off market, and building out a bit of a reputation in the industry is very, very valuable. This has served me quite well. I've been in the industry for a long time. I'm pretty sure I was the first person to start podcasting about buying online businesses specifically, and it's served me very, very well. Now, you don't need to go away and do what I do, but you can actually just become known in the space by jumping in different Facebook groups and communities and letting it be known that you want to buy certain businesses and the price range. But first and foremost, if you've just listened to this, I would suggest going to some of those brokers and just looking at the prices of the businesses and sort of seeing proof that these businesses, you can see on these brokerage sites how much those businesses are costing for sale, what their asking price is. And then you can see what their net profit is per year, and you can see how many hours per week it takes to run the business, what sort of operations are involved in running those businesses. If you're new to this, go away and check this out, and then you'll start to see your eyes open to this opportunity and see like, wow, okay, people are selling these great, successful businesses. Then the next question comes is like, why are people selling these businesses if they're profitable and they're working? Well, honestly, people get bored in their businesses. They can be great businesses and they can be making money, but people get bored and want to move on. It's the same with like, why would somebody sell their house? Well, Maybe the kids have moved out of home and it's time for them to move on from their family home. Or maybe they want to move somewhere closer to schools. Or maybe they just want to move because they want to change of scenery, right? There's nothing wrong with the house. It's just that they don't want to be there anymore. Now, I'm not saying that all businesses are great businesses and it's fine to buy any successful business. Sometimes there's businesses that look successful that actually aren't, and you do need to do your due diligence. That's what I'm here for. Make sure you get my framework that I mentioned before. There'll be a link to that in the show notes. Or if you want to buy a larger business, 7-figure, reach out. I can help you. I do the work for you on that one. Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback on this one. Please let me know, guys, what you think. Let me know what questions you have. I went through a lot of this quite fast, and I wanted to just fire hose you guys with as much information as possible. So re-listen to this again, and then contact me on the website or on LinkedIn. Thanks, guys. Speak to you soon.